started lessons on introduction to computers. And in that lesson, we looked at what a computer is, some examples and parts of the computer. Today, we are going to look at another topic under introduction to computers. Viewers, we are going to look at generation of computers. Generation of computers. So the topic for today is on generation of computers. Viewers, before we move on to today's topic, let's go over the assignment you were given the last time. The assignment you were given. 1. What is a computer? What is a computer? And in the lesson we said a computer is an electronic device that accepts data, processes the data, gives out output, and stores the output for immediate or later use. A computer is an electronic device that accepts data, processes the data, gives out output, and stores the output for immediate or later use. The next question, list 3 functions performed by a computer. List 3 functions performed by a computer. 1. A computer accepts data. A computer accepts data. 2. A computer processes data. A computer processes data. And then 3. A computer gives output. A computer gives output. So 3 functions performed by a computer. A computer accepts data, a computer processes data, and a computer gives output. Let's look at the last question. Name 3 examples of computers. Name 3 examples of computers. 1. A desktop computer. 2. A laptop computer. And then 3. A weighing scale. A weighing scale. So the weighing scale, both the one we use to check the weight of human beings and the one we use to check the weight of objects. We saw all the pictures the last time in that lesson. Viewers, I hope you all did the homework and you had the questions correct. Now let's move to today's topic on generation of computers. Generation of computers. When we say generation of computers, what does it mean? And before we move on to that, let's go through our lesson objectives for today. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to mention 3 features of first generation computers. Mention 3 features of first generation computers. 2. State 3 features of second generation computers. State 3 features of second generation computers. So by the end of the lesson, you will know the number of generations that we have, and then you will be able to state 3 features of both first and second generation of computers. Now let's start the lesson. When we say generation of computers, what does it mean? This refers to the transformation computers have passed through since its introduction. This refers to the transformation computers have passed through since its introduction. If you could remember, when we were treating examples of computers in the last lesson, we looked at smartphone, and during the lesson we went back to the memory lane where phone started. We went through the land phone, we went through the phone booth, the ordinary cell phone, before coming to the smartphone. The same way, computers that we see today started somewhere. So what we see today, when we say generation, we are talking about the transformation computers have passed through since its introduction. And on your screen, you see that we have first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, and fifth generation. So as of today, we have 5 generations of computers. So computers have passed through 5 generations. The first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, and then fifth generation. On your screen, what you see there under the first, second, third, fourth, fifth are the technology used by those computers. And in this lesson, we are going to look at first and second generation of computers. Now, with the first generation computers, they came around 1945 and lasted till 1956. From 1945 to 1956. That was the period first generation computers were used, from 1945 to 1956. And on your screen, this is how the first generation computer looked like. So today you are using a smartphone, you are using a tablet, you are using a phablet, a laptop, a desktop. The computer started with what you see on your screen. And this is not the only computer. It has a lot of setups, and you have to arrange it in a room. And in the lesson, you will see how it looks like. So the first generation computer looked like this, and it came around 1945 and lasted to 1956. Viewers, let's look at some of the features, the major features of first generation computers. The first feature, they used vacuum tubes as the main electronic component. So immediately you hear of first generation computers, the first thing that should come to your mind is vacuum tubes. And on your screen, you see the vacuum tubes. And this vacuum tube that you see served as the electronic component for first generation computers. The vacuum you see in the tube allowed free movement of electrons, giving power to the machine to operate. So the number one feature of first generation computers is that they used vacuum tubes as the main electronic component. And this is how vacuum tubes look like, as you see on your screen. This is how vacuum tubes looks like. Let's look at the second one. They used magnetic drum as memory or storage. In the first lesson, when we were treating the functions performed by a computer, or when we looked at the definition of computer, we said they store data for immediate or later use. So every computer comes with a memory or a storage media that stores data or information. And in the first generation, those computers use magnetic drum as memory or storage. And on your screen, this is how the magnetic drum looked like. So this was the storage media or the memory for first generation computer. Today, you came to meet pen drive, memory card, CDs, DVDs, and the rest. But during the first generation, when computers started, this was the memory or the storage device used. And they were called magnetic drum, as you see on the screen. Magnetic drum. So first generation computers used magnetic drum as memory or storage. 3. They used punch as memory as primary medium for input of both computer programs and data. They use punch cards as primary medium for input or computer, for both computer programs and data. When we were defining computer, or when we treated the parts of the computer, you saw the keyboard as the main input device for that computer. And during the first generation, the punch cards were used as the primary medium for input of data and computer programs. If you look at the punch card you see on your screen, it's like a sheet of paper with holes in it, and numbers are attached to the holes. So the position of the hole in the card will interpret or will give you the kind of data that that card contains. And we normally put this card in a punch card reader to read the data on this punch card. You make holes in the punch card and the position of the holes. And normally the position, when reading the data on the punch card, they read it vertically rather than horizontally. So data is read vertically, and the position of the hole will give you the meaning or the kind of data the punch card contains. So they use punch card. Today we have keyboards, we have keypads. When you go to the ATM, you use a keypad for input of data. When you are using a computer, you use the keyboard. When you are using your smartphone, you use the touch screen as your input device. But first generation computers use punch cards for input of data. 4, they were often expensive and very large, taking up entire rooms. They were often expensive and very large, taking up entire rooms. So you can see the first generation computer. You see someone sitting behind the computer, and at the back of the person, you see the other devices that is connected, or those devices are connected to the computer for it to operate. So you can see that it has taken an entire room. So you see the first generation computer. Today you can put a whole computer into your pocket. But when computers started, you can see how large they looked. And something like this also looks very expensive. So they were often expensive and very large, taking up entire rooms. The 5th feature is that processing was very slow. They were slow in processing data. They were very slow in processing data. Today, the kind of computers that we are using are very fast. But first generation computers were slow. So when we were defining computer, we said a computer accepts data. The next function is that the data must be processed. And during the first generation computer, processing was very slow. 6, they had small storage capacity. So we said computers store data for immediate or later use. And during the first generation, the storage capacity of the magnetic drum that you saw was very small. Today we have large storage capacities when it comes to storage media or devices. We have large. A pen drive can be 4 gig, 8 gig, 16, 32, 64, some 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, very large. The space on it is very large, but the first generation computers had small storage capacity. That means you could store small amounts of data on it. 7, they used machine level language for programming. They used machine level language for programming. Normally, if you look on your screen, you can see 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. The user using the computer knows 2, knows 4, but the computer does not recognize the 2 and the 4 and the plus or the equal sign we see. The computer represents every character on your keyboard with 8 numbers. and these 8 numbers are solely zeros and ones. So as you are typing or as you input data, the computer will be translating what you are typing into zeros and ones, as you see on your screen, zeros and ones. So they used machine language. We use the letters of the alphabet, and they use machine language. So if you type A, the computer will represent it with 8 numbers, zeros and ones. 8 numbers, zeros and ones. Even a full stop on the keyboard is represented by 8 binary numbers, and these zeros and ones are called binary numbers. So computers use machine language for programming, and that is how the machine language looks like. 8. They've consumed lots of electricity and generated large amounts of heat. Even up till now, computers must be used in a cool environment. And when it comes to the first generation computers, they generated a lot of heat. So that means that you need the ventilation in the room where the computer is placed must be very good. They need cool rooms because they generated large amounts of heat and also consumed a lot of electricity. Viewers, let's look at some of the examples of first generation computers. So the UNIVAC, the EDVAC, IBM-701 and ENIAC were all examples of first generation computers, and you see the pictures on your screen how they looked like. So viewers, in summary, this is what characterized first generation computers. And as I said, the number one thing that should come to your mind is that they used vacuum tubes as their main electronic component. Let's move on to second generation computers, and you see it on your screen. Second generation computers, how it looked like. And second generation computers came around 1956 to 1963. 1956 to 1963. So viewers, you see that those who developed the computer always studied hard, did a lot of research to bring improvement in the computers that they created. So second generation computers started in 1956 and lasted to 1963. And you see the picture on your screen. Viewers, let's go through some of the features of second generation computers. 1. They use transistors as main electronic component. They use transistors. The first generation used vacuum tubes, and the second generation used transistors. And as you see on the screen, these are examples of transistors. So this acted as the main electronic component. So that means that the vacuum tubes were eliminated, and then the transistors were introduced into second generation computers. So they were the main electronic components. 2. They also used punch cards as primary medium for input of data or computer programs. They also used the punch cards, and as I said, the punch cards contain numbers with holes, and the position of the hole will determine the kind of data on the punch card. So the punch card is inserted into a punch card reader for it to read the data, or the punch card reader will interpret the holes based on the position and give you the kind of data on the punch card. So the second generation also used punch cards as medium of input. They were smaller and faster than first generation computers, and that's the third feature. They were smaller and faster than the first generation computers. So you see it in the room. So as they introduced new computers, the sizes were also reduced. And in ICT, that is what we call nanotechnology. Nanotechnology. We always reduce. If an ICT tool is reduced in size, and it can even perform more functions than the bigger one, we are talking about nanotechnology. So the second generation computers were smaller and faster than the first generation computers. Let's look at the next one. These are printers, tape storage, disk storage, memory were started from second generation of computers. If you look at the pictures you see on your screen, you see a CD there. Very big. Very big. It's bigger in size than the one we see today. So printers, tape storage, we normally call it in our dialect PM on call. So those tape storage started coming during the second generation. And that was what they used to store data or programs. So tape storage and then printers. When we were treating the first lesson, we said that computers give output. And in that lesson, you saw a printer printing some information on a paper. So printers, tape storage, disk storage, memory started from second generation of computers. Today, if you go to the settings of the smartphone that you are using, you can check the size of your memory. You can check the size of your memory. If you are using a laptop or a desktop, your memory could be 2 gig, 4 gig, 6 gig, 8 gig. So these memories started from second generation. In the first generation, they were using the magnetic drum, both for all the kinds of storage they need. But as they progressed, CDs and then tape storage also came to being. So the second generation, printers, tape storage, and then disk storage were introduced. The fifth point is that processing speed improved. In the first generation, we saw that processing of data was very slow, but it improved with the second generation. So processing became faster with second generation computers. And then, as I explained, they also used machine language, but they used high-level machine languages. And that high-level machine languages, we have COBOL, we have FORTRAN. Today, some of the machine languages that we have, you can hear of Visual Basic, you can hear of Python. They are all computer languages. You can hear of a program like Java. They are all languages used by computers. So they use high-level languages, and examples were the COBOL and FORTRAN. Still generated a large amount of heat, but energy efficient. So that means that they still generated heat, but they consumed less power or less electricity. We saw that the first generation generated large amounts of heat as well as consuming large amount of electricity. But though the amount of heat generated did not change, but that machine consumed less energy. That machine was energy efficient. And then viewers, examples of second generation computers include IBM-1620, IBM-7094, CDC-1604, CDC-3600, and then UNIVAC 1108. These are all names of second generation computers. Today we have Dell, we have HP, we have a lot, we have Gateway, we have a lot of computer brands. And the same here, these were also examples of second generation computers. So viewers, today we looked at generation of computers, and when we say generation, we are talking about the various transformations that computers have passed through since its introduction. And we said that computers have passed through 5 generations. They are first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, and then 5th generation. And in the lesson today, we looked at first generation and second generation. So we said generation is the transformation these computers have passed through. With the first generation, we said that the number one key feature is that they used vacuum tubes. First generation computers used vacuum tubes. So you see the first generation started around 1945, and you see that computers that we see today came long time ago, even before some people were born. And I normally hear the elderly saying they are born, or they were born before computers. So, but computers came long time ago. Some brand themselves BBC, born before computers. But the era we find ourselves in information age, where computers are used to do various tasks. So first generation computers came around the 1940s, and we said that they use vacuum tubes for their main electronic components, and they also use magnetic drum for storage. They were huge. They could occupy an entire room. They were very huge. They generated lots of heat, consumed lot of electricity. We also looked at second generation computers, and they used transistors as their main electronic components. They used transistors. They also used punch cards for input of data, the same as the first generation. And we saw that printers, discs, tapes were all introduced during the second generation. We also saw that the second generation computers, though they still generated heat, but they were energy efficient. That is, they consumed less electricity. They also became smaller in size as compared to the first generation. So viewers, today we looked at generation of computers. We are saying we have 5 generations. We looked at the first generation and then the second generation. Before we end the lesson, let's take this assignment before we end the lesson. 1. State 3 characteristics of first generation computers. State 3 characteristics of first generation computers. We looked at about 9 of them. That is the features. So you state 3. And then 2, you also state 3 characteristics of second generation computers. So 1, you are stating 3 characteristics of first generation computers, and then 2, you are stating 3 characteristics of second generation computers. Viewers, we have come to the end of lesson 2 of Introduction to Computers on generation of computers. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. In the next lesson that you will have, you will look at the other generations. And until we meet in our 3rd lesson, this is your teacher, Ernest Ato Benson. Bye-bye.